Sonia Luna, CEO and founder of Aviva Spectrum, the leading compliance firm in sunny Southern California. Today's video is the template video. It's COSO's template video. It covers volume 4 of the bundled series that COSO published about its new framework. It covers some of the why factors on the templates, how to implement the templates, how to test the effectiveness of the templates, and more importantly, what is some of the supporting audit techniques you'll need to create to support your conclusions on the internal control effectiveness. So we hope you enjoy the video. Please email us new topics about COSO implementation issues, challenges, and opportunities at info@avivaspectrum.com. Thank you and have a wonderful compliance day. So let me begin to give you all a great introduction. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. My name is Sonia Luna. I am the CEO and founder of Aviva Spectrum. We're a boutique consulting firm headquartered in Los Angeles. And we have offices here in Los Angeles, and we have affiliate offices in China as well. And today, we are going to bring you a very technical webinar that deals with COSO's new framework, but more importantly, Volume 4, that is called a Compendium of Approaches and Examples. And this is going to be covering some technical, specific page number, document numbers. So the audience for this webinar truly is a manager or a senior manager, and definitely the chief audit executives and maybe some even audit committee members who need to know about the new framework and the implementation project they are going to undertake. The agenda for today, I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot of what the new framework looks like. I'm going to discuss how to use Volume 4 and the templates, meaning what's the most, if I were to tell someone how to read Volume 4, which primarily relates to a lot of U.S. public companies to comply with SOX 404, how would I advise them to read it? The other items I'm going to cover is major changes impacting this guidance in Volume 4 in terms of what is COSO saying in their examples, what they would like to see given in the new framework, what they would like to see in terms of sufficient audit evidence. This is going to be extremely critical for those, again, the audience of a senior manager, director of internal audit, audit committee members. I'm going to cover a template that we have created internally that you will not see anywhere else. It will not be provided by any of the other firms. Why? Because it's like giving away, it's like McDonald's giving away their secret sauce to the Big Mac. Our give to the community, which all of you should be joining, is the COSO implementation community. It's in LinkedIn. These templates are going to cover all the major 5 components in the framework. Then you must stay at the end of the webinar. I'm going to cover key actual source documents where you can get it yourself. Okay, don't take my word for it. Go and take the hyperlink approach, and I will show you how to do this at the end of the video to get those source documents and look like a hero in front of your board members when you need to speak to them about the new framework. Here is I'm getting some feedback that people may not be able to hear me, and I hope that this is coming across well. I have it that people can hear me. Can I get a quick shot back that folks can hear me right now? Great, wonderful. So the audio is working, thank you. This is the new framework. I promised you I would give you a quick snapshot. So what is in the new framework? In this snapshot, you're looking at 17 principles. Some of you are saying, so what's the big deal? In 2006, COSO gave you an updated framework, but guess who it was for? Smaller public companies. And in that framework, they had 20 principles, so they narrowed it down. Okay, but here's the trick. In 2006, when they came up with 20 principles related to smaller public companies to comply with SOX, they had 76 attributes. When they came up with this new version, you're seeing 17. And the first idea that you gravitate towards, or most people do, is they say, wonderful, it's less work. Wrong. In 2006, with the 20 principles, they had 76 attributes. This new updated framework has 87 attributes. Attributes, the best way I've explained it to people at cocktail parties, because you know that when you do go to a cocktail party, people naturally gravitate towards you, especially when you say you do auditing. And the way I've explained it to them is, imagine going to a bar and there's a bar stool. A principal is the seat of that bar stool. An attribute is the legs of that bar stool. So COSO in its new guidance said, okay, we have 87 different attributes for all of these related 17 principles. You have to demonstrate sufficient evidence that you have clearly met the requirement of meeting those attributes. Now, it must have only 87 controls, because those attributes, if you read them, they're extremely broad in some cases, and I'll cover them in a minute in the template session, because we are going to cover our proprietary template that we created. So in my last webinar, I covered the overview of the major changes. This is a hyperlink that you can go to see the recorded version of what are the major changes. This is an awesome presentation. If you want to give it to your audit committee members, board members, it's less than an hour. In it, I explain about our control compliance analysis, or it's a CCA. It's literally your COSO health check. And for those of you on this particular webinar, I'm allowing you to email me. There was some confusion in the last webinar. You'll see an email address here today. It's info@avivaspectrum.com. Email me right now so I can at least reserve some spots for you for our control compliance analysis. And I'm going to cover it in just a moment at the tail end, right before our source document slide, so we can cover what that is and what it entails. But in the beginning, I just wanted to make sure you have the right contact information. In the last webinar, it was a little confusing. Again, info@avivaspectrum.com is where to reach me, and I have a link here to the recorded of the overview of changes for COSO. Now, we're going to cover some action items that I want to make sure this group can address today. Some of you are going to be very enthused and you're going to be action-oriented, and our takeaway as a company, as an organization, is to give back and create communities like what we have done with COSO Implementation Group in LinkedIn. There are going to be other webinars, even more technical to this one that you're getting today. So I would encourage you to join that group. You'll see that it's a very technical group. Again, the target is those directors, chief audit executives that need to lead a project team through the implementation of the new framework. So please join that group today. Now, let's get into the meat of Volume 4. First off, how is it supposed to be used? Okay. In the beginning introduction of that volume, it says the intended audience, and it goes on in this very long paragraph. Basically, if you want to know the gist, it applies to everyone. In its introduction paragraph, it covers private companies, public, nonprofit, and it even, guess what, says smaller public companies can use this updated framework. And they also say that this guidance is also intended for them as well. So the gist, the Volume 4 is intended for everyone. Now, how to read approaches and examples. In their introduction, they say, okay, this Volume 4 is going to hammer out in clear, bold titles, approaches, examples. So how should you read it? Approaches are the summary level of activities for management. I call it the 50,000-foot set of activities. Examples are that 10,000 getting into the weeds type of detail illustrations on how to execute those summary level of activities. And of course, they have a ton of examples. The guidance is well over 150 pages. And again, this webinar is honing it down to what you just need to know. Now, in Appendix A of Volume 4, this is something that I found extremely useful. They have a summary of topics. I've only listed a few topics here that are located in Appendix A. For example, one of the topics in Appendix A is what are the expectations for governance oversight? What does that mean? Audit committee members, board members. Okay, you have a new framework. Are there any updates to that? There's a topic description, a header called Expectations for Governance Oversight. Now, if you're dealing with one topic is in there, it's called globalization. Don't let it fool you. It's actually covering the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and that's on page 147. But Appendix A is dealing with bigger picture type of topics, so you can just see my first two examples here. So if you have a more in-depth question that relates to your industry, the geographical locations that you are conducting business, I would go to Appendix A, but I wouldn't start there. I would start my reading after the introduction. Now, there is a disclosure in the introduction pages about the limitations of Volume 4. It says it does not have 100% of all examples, and it makes that statement in page 2 of its introduction to readers of Volume 4. Now, also in Volume 4, it describes the considerations of external financial reporting. So Volume 4 is saying, hey, this is our guidance for external financial reporting, but they make it clear that there are two types. There are the financial statement related types, and then they have this category that they have in the introduction saying other. So what does that mean? This means that for using their templates and their guidance material, you can use it for your typical SOX assessment in terms of controls, for your annual and interim financial statements that you issue out, your 10Ks and your 10Qs. But if management and its oversight committees, such as the audit committee, committee members wanted to know if there are other ramifications of using Volume 4, checks and balances of controls, what other types of financial reporting can they say there's some good checks and balances? And they have this other category in terms of defining the type as your earnings release, those selected financial information that the company might put on its website, as well as selected numbers in certain regulatory filings, like putting 8K items out there to the Securities Exchange Commission. Now, also in the intro, this is a huge technical issue, is dealing with materiality. Now, even with the advances of our webinar, etc., hyperlinks don't come across in these webinars. So at the tail end of the presentation, which you must stay on, I'm going to show you how you can connect with me to get the actual Microsoft version of this. And you'll see right here I have SEC guidance. It's topic 1M of the SEC staff bulletin that they issued out, and it was dealing with materiality considerations for management. And this is the updated SEC guidance dealing with materiality. And guess what? I also have the International Accounting Standards Board hyperlink. You'll see there it's guidance that COSO calls out to for management to take into consideration certain materiality items, and it's paragraph QC. This is part of their quality concepts framework, and that's a hyperlink to the actual document itself. So what's the conclusion that COSO in its Volume 4, what are they saying about materiality? They're saying that the standards that they want management to do is for both international and what the SEC puts out there for management, it's almost identical. So in other words, COSO doesn't see a major difference if you were to use IASB's version or the SEC's version, and that's what they make a statement on. And so for those of you who want to do further in-depth technical review, you're going to need this hyperlink to get to the source document. Now, in COSO's guidance in Volume 4, there are no changes in the financial statement assertions. So all of these listed are exactly the same. Also, COSO puts out there, it says, FYI, everybody, these are noted by the AICPA, the PCAOB, and the International Accounting and Assurance Standards Boards. They all agree that these are the financial statement assertions. So in other words, for those of you, which we have some people actually in various countries today with us, I can tell you that the new framework has not updated, and neither has the guidance. They have not updated the language in terms of these assertions. So if you're using them now, it not only agrees with international standards, but U.S. standards as well. Okay, so what is the use of the templates and documentations? What they call out in COSO's Volume 4, they say smaller entities can take those examples and translate them for just their entity. It's going to be maybe a little less onerous, but the types of documents still need to exist. So in other words, they're not letting you get a pass at saying, well, I'm a smaller company, and we informally do this process, or we informally kind of talk about it, but it's not written anywhere. They say, no. These examples are solid, and when we say we call out a certain document in our examples, it means you can do the same thing. So documentation has two levels according to COSO's Volume 4. It says management's documentation of efforts must be at a level to state that it has sufficient evidence. So there's been several court cases, mainly out of here in the U.S. in terms of they've been in the courts in Delaware. And sufficient evidence goes through a process of what's called prudent official test. What does that mean? A prudent official test in our court system says if they were to hire someone, let's say, as technical as myself, Sonia Luna, what would I do? What level of evidence would I have chosen to conduct my internal control assessment for SOX 404? Test and sufficient evidence is also documented in a lot of textbooks about the depth of it and sampling methodology, etc. But just remember, when you get into a court setting, there's another test to get to sufficient evidence, and that's the prudent official test. Now, the level of documentation, the second level, is your external auditors attesting to your internal controls. And they're going to leverage management's understanding of controls. So those walkthroughs, and I can't tell you, there were 3 times in Volume 4 where it calls out management's understanding, not only the interview process of the walkthroughs, but samples, okay, identifying those documents that substantiate those interview answers, and the external auditor's assessment of that documentation so that they can also complete their understanding of internal controls. So what is COSO saying in Volume 4? That management's documentation should be as good as what an external auditor would want to see. That's kind of the gist that I got from the 2 levels of documentation that they called out in the introduction pieces. Now, in terms of high use of judgment, in Volume 4, COSO does say management still gets they still have the ability to have judgment, okay, and the depth and how they document. But again, going back to the gist of what I've seen in the actual examples, they are calling out for more documentation and not less. Now, what are some of the ground rules for Volume 4 and the most effective way to read this volume? Having gone through it, I said, okay, if I had to get a senior associate to start from scratch to read this, where would I get them to start? Well, first off, the chapters after the introduction chapter, all other chapters are broken out by one COSO component. So your control environment component has one chapter. Your risk assessment component has another chapter. So for me, from a project management type of style, my personality, I would say divide and conquer. But I'm also very priority-based. I'm a very priority-based thinker. So my style of management is I would take a look at where are the most significant changes in the new framework that I know about and ensure that I at least start there first, because if there's minimal changes from the old framework to the new framework, why am I reading that first? So I've highlighted this for you so you would have a takeaway in terms of what my style of management, which is divide and conquer. We got to work as a team. Control environment and your risk assessment components, those chapters, are going to have the most significant changes. Now, we're going to cover some templates. This is really the meat of why I believe most of you joined. So in my earlier webinar, I gave you a proprietary template. We've updated it for this particular webinar. In it, we have we're showing a proprietary template of how to attack the new framework and also identify audit evidence that would justify that we've applied the new framework. So if I had to go to an audit committee and I'm explaining the major changes and they say, well, how does that directly impact your existing audit plan? This is my cheat sheet. This is where I would go to ensure that I could at least tell them at page number XYZ of Volume 4, which is the guidance for SOX 404, and for those companies and organizations in international locations, you have similar federal laws that apply that say companies now need to check their internal controls. I've identified the page number where it has the most significant examples and the audit evidence that it's calling out to. And we'll cover, some of you are asking me about getting a copy of this. We're going to cover this a little bit later in the webinar. So hold on till the end and we'll let you know how to get this, okay? Now, this is just the control environment example I gave you. So for this webinar, I mentioned that this is probably going to be one of the most technical free webinars you'll get this entire year. Here I call out in this proprietary template one of the major changes in the control environment component of COSO, and I also reference a technical source. It's the G tag. It's a technical guidance for auditing IT. It's issued by the Institute of Internal Auditors, and you can see that I've highlighted the item in yellow. So our template has a yellow highlight to say, ding, 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 major change from old framework to new framework. This presentation says, okay, this is best of breed of how to attack this particular change. In this case, I'm highlighting for Principle 4 of the control environment. It's dealing with the major change that COSO put out in Volume 1, 2, and 3. It's calling out you got to do a more robust assessment of third-party sources. And what's the leading trend right now? It's cloud computing, it's IT outsourcing, and related IT application outsourcing. So this particular guidance, this is the second edition. This was issued June of last year. So this is the latest edition on how to make that assessment, and this will allow you, it actually has some templates itself, on how to do the proper due diligence, not only before, but during, when you're in the relationship and looking at those special reports that the vendor may have, what to do when you don't have those reports. What if that vendor cannot give you their auditor's opinion on their controls that you have outsourced to? It gives you some guidance on there, as well as how do you monitor the relationship. That is the biggest deficiency that the PCAOB is seeing in some of their audits of the external auditors on how they audit their clients and how they're monitoring these outsourced relationships. So again, we'll cover how to get this related source document that you have right here in front of you. Now, in the risk assessment template, I'm highlighting a few items. One, the risk assessment has Principle 6 to 9. There's 27 attributes. And I've highlighted just a few items here that are major changes to the risk assessment component of COSO's framework. The first is Principle 8, dealing with fraud. Your assessment in the risk assessment process, so we start out doing the aggregate risk assessment. The audit committee needs to be involved at least at a discussion level, and that it should be documented in the audit committee minutes how fraud was incorporated and what questions were asked and how they were answered, et cetera, and how they got comfortable in the inclusion of your fraud assessment in the global aspect of your aggregate risk assessment. Now, in Principle 9, some of the major changes dealing with significant changes to your risk assessment process. This is a significant word change. In the older framework and older guidance, they used language that made the suggestion to management that once you made that identification of risk, the monitoring aspect of that risk had a low priority. In other words, it wasn't such a high requirement. In this new framework, in this risk assessment principle that we're looking at, which is Principle 9, and I realize it is a little hard to see. Trust me, we've got the templates later. The calling out of you conducting a fourth quarter materiality check as well as a risk assessment check needs to be done. And what does that mean in non-audit language? When you start your project of, let's say, SOX 404, you start out with a planning materiality. Your external auditors have an audit requirement to look at that at the end of the year. Why? The audit risk is that you have under-audited the accounts. You missed an account that you should have audited, and you planned a materiality number and other items, and you missed something. You should have audited something. You didn't catch it. So external auditors are required to document this recomputation of both materiality as well as quantifying risk. Management needs to be doing that as well. So this is just a quick highlight in terms of some of the major changes in that risk assessment. It's something brand new that I haven't seen in the old framework. Now, in the control activities component, which has principles 10 to 12, there are 16 attributes, and there is a major change in Principle 11. So this, Principle 11, deals with IT general controls, right? It's your network, it's a lot of IT application-related issues. They, too, are calling for a fourth quarter or year-end validation test of those IT controls. You should be managing any significant changes. So whether it's a quarterly sub-certification to your IT department, whether it's a year-end analysis at the end of your SOX assessment, but something has to be documented as to what you saw, who was included, and then final sign-off that there were no significant changes and all the risks were appropriate. Now, a lot of you may have missed last year's COSO's guidance on cloud computing. This is a great source of the minimum change management, security, and operational risks that COSO is calling out that deals with Principle 11. This is actually free to download off of COSO's website. Again, at the end of the presentation, we'll tell you how to get a hyperlink from this presentation. Now, this is just the control activity template. Now we're moving on to another component of the COSO framework called Information and Communication Template. Okay, so this has principles 13 to 15. It's got 14 attributes, and this is dealing with the uses of relevant information. This, I highlight in yellow here, the data validation test. Earlier this year, 2 of the PCOB members were at a major conference that I attended, and both of them were honing in on their recent report that they issued in December 2012 about the key root causes of audit failure of all the big 4, including the other 4 major CPA firms. They conducted a study. It was, I believe, over a 2-year study, and they wanted to do a root cause analysis of why they are finding deficiencies within the top-tier audit firms. And guess what came up? One of the core 8 issues is data validation. Auditors were relying too much about a system without validating the system itself, the data input and the data output. And the audit theory behind that is if you have junk in, you'll have junk out. So the ding or the red flag that the PCOB was saying is auditors weren't doing enough to validate those key application controls, data validation controls, and the output validation controls. And this report was issued again in December. So what does that mean to you, the audience? Let's say you're a public company today. What I can almost assure you is whenever a PCOB comes out with a report and it says these are the root causes of audit deficiencies for external auditors, I can almost assure you that next year you will see your external auditors doing a heck of a lot more on data validation of your key in-scope applications. It's not going away. So now the question is, are you going to be more prepared, Or are you just going to be reactive and let the external auditors dictate your course of action? So that's something for you guys to consider, and I call out the page number as well as an example that COSO has in Volume 4. Now, also in the information and communication, there's Principle 15 dealing with communication internally. This particular component, most people, when they first start out in auditing, they think information and communication is probably dealing with just IT. It's actually not. It's about how key reports, how data is entered and submitted within the organization and externally. One of the major changes that we found in Volume 4, as well as in the new framework, is the board oversight responsibility in terms of certain types of communication. The best of breed that I have seen in terms of templates is the AICPA Audit Committee Toolkit, because one of the attributes in this particular component is calling out that the audit committee needs to do a better job in assessing the internal audit function. They don't say just the internal auditor, even though they do call it out, but they call it as a function, as a department. Now, in this toolkit, it covers at least 25 questions the audit committee should be grilling whoever heads up that internal audit function. And it's pretty darn robust, and it's not, for me, very shocking that it looks very similar to the questions that they would ask external auditors. So what's the depth of this information you should take away today? If you're not at the seat with the audit committee members and you're a chief audit executive or you're a director, etc., this new framework is saying that this is a must. You got to do it. They should be owning up to their responsibilities, asking you at least those 25 questions, and they're located here in this audit committee toolkit. Now, in the monitoring component, this is the last component, there's Principle 16 and 17 that has 10 attributes. The major finding, not only in that PCAOB report that I was mentioning in terms of root causes of external auditors doing a bad job, for management, the Institute of Internal Auditors looks at chief audit executives and how they run their internal audit group. And guess what one of their core findings is that management doesn't have a clear direction, meaning a policy or procedure of how to deal with control deficiencies. I've listed here one best of breed that I have found in the marketplace. It's called the GATE for IT General Control Deficiency Assessment. Again, at the end of the webinar, I'll tell you how to get access to this, because this actually hyperlinks to that PDF file, which you must be a member to the IIA to get it. But it does talk about what happens when you have a control failure in your IT general controls, and then what's the best way to assess it. Also, you can do you can take away from that guidance what your source policy and procedure should look like. So the new framework, in all of its examples that I saw, it pointed to a source document that could prove without a doubt that management had some sense of what they would do for IT control deficiencies as well as financial controls, because there's separate guidance for that. But more importantly, what's the elevation process? How does it get reported? How frequently will it be assessed to be remediated? So the policies and procedures for this should not just be one paragraph. In the examples, it's a very robust policy and procedure that leads a person to audit both the policy as well as the source documents where they found the policy. Now, we're going to move on to implementation and lead time. A lot of you in the last webinar enjoyed not only the technical aspects, but you wanted to know, okay, what do I do today? Where do I go from here to 2014? COSO put out a press release stating that they believe 2014 is sufficient amount of time for you to understand the framework, adopt it, implement it, get all these records in order that you need. Okay. If I were doing this assessment for a typical company, I go through each segment. So first off, I look at the company and look at how the company and its forecasted, let's say, activities might impact my implementation. So I would give myself 2 months from inception to completion. I would look at my SOX aggregate impact. In other words, I would inventory all my deliverables. What do I produce at the end of the day? And I would map it back to that COSO template that we're going to share later and say, where am I deficient? Where do I need to have more documents? So I would give myself 3 months lead time. Why? Because you're going to need brainstorming sessions with other colleagues in your company to ensure that you have the best inventory list before you implement in 2014. The other items is I would go through sampling impact. A lot of people who have looked at surveys know that testing documents gets the biggest part of the SOX budget, and I would give myself 3 to 4 months lead time to figure out, okay, if I have a new policy or if I have XYZ new documents that I need to assess, how does that impact my testing? So I would give myself, from a project management perspective, 3 to 4 months time to look at that. Now, our control compliance analysis, we're offering it to selected individuals. I'm listing my email out again at info@avivaspectrum.com. So email me today to block off some time because I can conduct this control compliance analysis. I call it the COSO health check. It's getting you from where are you today, where you need to be in 2014, and going through some of those key core gap analysis, those core documents by page number, and telling you what the roadmap should look like for you. And it's an independent assessment that we've actually been paid on several occasions to do this type of assessment, and we've charged, gosh, at a low end at least $7,500 to do this diagnostic. I call it the COSO health check now because it's the latest and greatest in terms of how the control compliance analysis works. As I mentioned to you, I would let you know some other core source documents. Here are the major components, those 5 components of COSO. I've listed out in these boxes here where some of the core source materials can be found. When you get access to this PowerPoint slide, and it's going to be on SlideShare, all of these boxes hyperlink to the source document, as well as other points in the slide that I was sharing with you earlier. So now I'm going to cover a couple of other action items before you implement. I mentioned that this PowerPoint is knee-deep with major hyperlinks to major source documents. This picture of our SlideShare account at avivaspectrum.com, this has all the PowerPoints, so you'll get the robust Microsoft PowerPoint slides, which will include those hyperlinks for you to create your own action items list as well. Now, for those of you who want to contact me personally, I'm leaving my contact information, and I'm hoping that you'll connect with me as well on LinkedIn. What happens in LinkedIn is I create other PowerPoint presentations for example, the Institute of Internal Auditors here in Los Angeles. I create certain events, and I create technical materials for them. I'm actually doing an event this coming year. Those slides I may not promote in the COSO group, but I'll promote in other ways in my LinkedIn profile. You can also get access to those PowerPoint slides that will also have hyperlinks, because my motto is once I find a good source document, I don't want to try to figure out how to get back to it. And therefore, my methodology in creating PowerPoints is to always have a hyperlink related to source documents, so that way it's an easier find versus me having to download over 50 different PDFs and trying to remember how it relates to certain materials that I have created for technical guidance materials. So I'm going to open up for questions right now to the group, and I hope that you all found this technical overview of Volume 4 extremely useful. So again, for those of you who have questions, you can either ping me or you can unmute your phone. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes for you guys to ask questions, and I'll go through a couple of others that are here on the sidebar that came in earlier. Okay, so far, in terms of printing the slides, I got a question. You can print the slides once you gain access to them on SlideShare, so you must search us on SlideShare at slideshare.com, and you are going to look for Aviva Spectrum in terms of the search within that website. You will find us, and I showed the link to that. And basically, once you find us, you'll see all the PowerPoints. This particular PowerPoint, someone had asked about the timing. This PowerPoint will be up in the next 2 days. Now, there's a question about smaller public companies. Should I still be using the 2006 framework or adopt the 2013? The short answer is you need to adopt the 2013. The reason being is there's more robust documentation requirements, and if you're a smaller public company, your external auditor will be required to be auditing at that level. So I would automatically try to shift to 2013. I don't think the PCOB is holding or minimizing their audit efforts on your external auditors. And their bar, their threshold is very, very high. It's not getting lower. So as what I have found from professional experience over the last 16 years, it is much, much cheaper for management to guide the conversation in any new change, whether it's an accounting pronouncement or an auditing set of standards. It's much, much cheaper for management to control the conversation, be prepared and say, we know 2006 is out there, but we want to move to 2013. We think that these are the changes, and this is how we plan to implement the changes. So remember, I think it's best of breed to do that. Now, I got a question about the deadline to comply with COSO 2013. Well, COSO, just so we're clear, COSO is not a regulatory body. COSO is comprised of 5 professional associations. The Securities Exchange Commission, which I'm flying out in November to see them on a particular it's a forum that they have, and they invite me to attend. But essentially, the Securities Exchange Commission still has to create a press release what they're going to do about COSO's framework. So I may have more information in November, which I will publish in December more than likely. So as a Christmas present, we may do another webinar on what the SEC's position on COSO's implementation efforts are from the Securities Exchange Commission's perspective. What I have found in professional experience is that typically what happens with the SEC is that they will give non-accelerated filers and IPO companies a reprieve of adopting anything new. So I'm thinking more than likely they will tell non-accelerated filers and new IPOs that they can wait until 2015 to adopt it. For those companies that are accelerated filers, what I have seen in practice with other items is typically the SEC says, you're big enough, you can figure it out, just do it. So I would not wait until a press release comes out. And the SEC is supposed to give guidance in terms of your disclosure in your 10K, which is your item 9. My understanding so far in the marketplace, talking to SEC attorneys, they believe that they will be in the near future in this coming 10K filings. We're talking about December 31st, 2013, that management more than likely will describe to shareholders what they're going to do about the new framework. So it's not set in stone, but I am talking to SEC attorneys about disclosures for this upcoming 10K, which is, again, for most public companies, December 31st, 2013. So it's on hold right now. Now, I have a question in terms of are there exceptions to adopting the 2013 framework for companies that are emerging growth companies as defined by the Jobs Act? So to this question, I know that there's a reprieve. Now, here's a very legal and very technical issue. Management in its item 9 still says that they have to assess their internal controls. So you must call out what framework you're using. Over 98% of U.S. public companies say that are registered here and are located here say that they use the COSO framework. Okay, so I would be very cautious if I said something that I really didn't do, or I didn't clarify to a shareholder which framework I leverage. Is it the old one, the 1992, or did I move to the 2013 version? So even though you could be classified by the Federal Jobs Act as a emerging growth company, remember, management still has that 10K filing that has that item 9A. They still state that they've done something, and they have to call out a framework. So I would talk to your attorneys and say, okay, well, I got to do something. The question is, how do I disclose that I'm using the old one or the new one, and why I picked one versus another? So I would say to that question that I would talk to the attorneys, number one, about proper disclosure. Number two, I would wait till December of this year to see what kind of press releases the SEC finally puts out about the adoption of the new framework. Okay, and the location of the slides I mentioned earlier, it's going to be in SlideShare, so you must connect with Aviva Spectrum on SlideShare. And I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions, because we can close out this webinar, and I hope to see you at the COSO Implementation LinkedIn group. It was a pleasure having you all as a guest to this webinar. I really appreciate you attending, and I love feedback. One of my life goals is to be a lecturer, a speaker on these types of issues. So please send me an email at sonia.luna@Aviva Spectrum so I can learn, grow, and become better at my craft. So I really appreciate any feedback that you can give me in terms of constructive ways that I can improve these types of webinars. And also, you can email me for any new topics that you wish we can do a webinar on that would help the COSO implementation group. I really would love to hear your suggestions. With that, I will sign off and say thank you again for joining us.